Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I am Councillor Deborah Saw, leader of Babergh District Council, and will be chairing this meeting. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use, that you do not interrupt other speakers, that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the Modern Gov app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of this meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you intend to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. Before I move to the agenda, could I ask everyone here to stand and observe a minute's silence in memory of Anita Rose, a resident of Brantham, found injured and unconscious on the 24th of July, and who sadly died recently of her injuries. And the three young girls, Elsie Dot Stankham, Alice De Silva Guerra, and Bibi King, who were killed in a heinous knife attack in Southport on Monday. We offer their families, friends, and communities our heartfelt condolences. Please stand. Members of the public. Before I begin proceedings, I want to say that I know people have very strongly held views about the possibility of charging for car parking. But can I urge everyone in the chamber and in the community at large to conduct themselves in a civil and respectful way? Some councillors have been subjected to abusive messages on social media and suffered bullying and intimidation. There is no need for such behaviour, which all right-minded people would condemn. We are so much better than that. Now, moving to the agenda, please. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Daniel Potter.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any other interests to declare? No? Okay. Item 3, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Okay. Item 4, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Item 5, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, forthcoming decisions list. Are there any comments? No, thank you. Right, this brings us on to item 7, BCA/24/06, car parking charges and road traffic orders. We are joined in the chamber by Mark Ems, Director of Operations and Climate Change, Matt Smith, Parking Services Manager, Jack Burton, Finance Business Partner, and Catherine Davies, Sustainable Travel Officer. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Right. I will now introduce report BCA 2406, car parking charges and road traffic orders. Firstly, as I said in January and again in April, I do want to acknowledge that this is a very emotive and divisive subject, probably the most divisive we have ever had, as evidenced by the anger and misunderstandings that have accompanied the debate in various public forums, and the fact that this is the third time Cabinet has considered it this year. We must act in the best interests of all of our residents and communities and consider the wider good of the whole district. First and foremost is our statutory requirement to approve a balanced budget each year. Part of this includes our medium-term forecasting. Our forecast budget shortfall, as summarised in paragraph 1.7 of the report, is huge, and the cost of our car parks is a not inconsiderable part of this. While this is always heavily caveated due to uncertainties, particularly with government funding, we are most definitely facing a bleak prognosis. We must sort this out so that we can focus on doing what we have been elected to do, provide quality local services to all our residents, businesses and visitors in the years ahead. And, as indicated in section 5 of the report, we also need to generate income to deliver the priorities we have agreed in our plan for Babergh and the requirements of our parking strategy. None of our discretionary services can continue to be subsidised and be exempt from our move to full cost recovery. And when we talk about full cost recovery, there is nothing sinister about it. All it means is that a service's full cost of delivery is calculated and that it pays its way. In other words, it isn't subsidised by funding from elsewhere. Those that say we pay council tax for this are expecting council tax to do some heavy lifting it simply isn't designed to do. Babergh's council tax is relatively small compared with what we deliver, just £188.10 per annum or £3.62 per week for an average Band D property, and it only covers about 24% of our budget. So, now to what we are deciding today. I won't cover the points we have already agreed in previous meetings, but I will focus on what the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has asked us to do following the call-in on the 22nd of April, and which is discussed in the report before you. There were 6 recommendations, which can be found in Appendix C, and I will address each one in turn. I would like to thank members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the thorough examinations of this matter that they have carried out. Now, Recommendation 1, the Cabinet is presented with and gives sufficient consideration to the details of a 1-hour free tariff option within the Cabinet report. We did discuss and vote on this at our Cabinet meeting on the 8th of April, but we will now look again at the detail of the cost comparison between this and no free period. The financial implications are summarised in paragraphs 6.1 to 6.7, and the detailed financial modelling, which was given to ONS on the 22nd of April, is shown in Appendix D. I know that the numbers in this appendix are complex and difficult to understand, so I will explain them now. We have already ruled out, and ONS has accepted this, not implementing short-term charges at all. Not doing anything would leave us even worse off than we are now, and there will be increasing budget pressures as costs rise. The first block of columns in the table in Appendix D shows a cumulative additional budget pressure of £125,000 by 2026 to 27. This would have to be met from reserves we're fast depleting. Our parking services financial position is currently neither resilient nor sustainable. This must change. The rest of the table shows the costs, income and forecast benefits for the budget for each of the tariff options. For all options, you will see in the third row from the bottom that we will still be adrift from full cost recovery, but the charging options provide benefits to the budget in terms of a much reduced subsidy. Over the next 3 years, well, 2.5 in practice, Option A has a cumulative benefit of just under £1.9 million, whereas the cumulative benefit of option C is much less at just over 1.2 million. This reduced benefit of £644,000 represents a pressure on our budget that would have to be met elsewhere, either from those depleted reserves or a reduction in service delivery. It is for this reason that option C is not recommended. It is a serious financial impediment to achieving our objectives. It takes us further away from our desire to achieve full cost recovery, and it puts further pressure on and increases the risk to delivery of other services. But it's not just about the numbers. This option would be operationally challenging, requiring significantly more enforcement and encouraging adverse behaviours such as many quick trips rather than fewer longer stays and frequent car park hopping. We will debate this thoroughly today. Recommendation 2, the Cabinet gives further consideration to the local economic impact of the proposed changes to the car parking fees. This is addressed in paragraphs 4.8 to 4.16 of the report. Appendix E contains a summary of the Transport Research Laboratory's advantages and disadvantages of parking charges. As we have said many times before, the price of car parking is not the only, or indeed the primary factor affecting local economic success, and a range of other factors has been provided in paragraph 4.12. If it were, then it would be impossible for any council, or indeed a private car park operator, to charge for parking anywhere, whereas about 90% of councils do have paid parking. We have committed that future reviews of parking charges will include monitoring of local data, and this is included in today's recommendation 3.3. Recommendation 3, the Cabinet gives further consideration to the impact of the proposed changes to the car parking fees on those facing poverty in rural districts. This is addressed in paragraphs 4.17 to 4.25 of the report. Paragraph 4.20 provides data of those in receipt of benefits living in wards where they are most likely to drive to either Sudbury, Hadley or Lavenham and use our car parks. Appendix F contains more detailed data about vulnerable residents. As a result of our further consideration, in addition to a reduction in the all-day tariff, we will now not be increasing the season ticket charge, and this is recommendation 3.1. More information about season tickets is provided in paragraphs 6.8 to 6.12. Recommendation 4, the Cabinet gives further consideration to the impact of the proposed changes to the car parking fees on vulnerable individuals in the district. This is addressed in section 10 of the report. Appendix I contains a full equality impact assessment, which has been taken into account in the preparation of this report and today's recommendations. Recommendation 5, that officers meet with Great Cornard Parish Council prior to Cabinet meeting. This is addressed in section 9 of the report, and a meeting took place on the 7th of June, attended by the Chief Executive, the Director of Operations, Councillor Saw, and me. There's an appendix that contains the minutes of this meeting. Recommendation 6, that the previous recommendations made by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee are further reviewed and fully considered. This is addressed in paragraphs 4.26 to 4.30 of the report. The previous 11 ONS recommendations are provided in Appendix H, along with our written response to ONS. We have already stated that we are content with the response to these, but if Cabinet has any further comment, then we can discuss it today. Now moving on to Lavenham. Following our debate at the Cabinet meeting on the 8th of April, we agreed to modify our recommendation 3.8, which is 1.8 in Appendix B of today's report, to say including any minor amendments resulting from any subsequent dialogue and agreements with Lavenham Council. This was a result of a letter received from Lavenham Parish Council. Lavenham has subsequently held a public meeting and a parish council meeting to agree what they would like to see for parking charges in the village. On behalf of the Cabinet, I would like to thank Lavenham Parish Council for their positive engagement with us on this matter. We have not yet been asked by either Hadley or Sudbury to discuss anything with them, but we are always ready to talk to them about their specific issues. I note from the email we all received yesterday that Hadley now wishes to do this, and we will. Now, a few comments on the legislative basis for what all councils do with regard to parking provision and charging, and this is referenced in section 7 of the report. A local authority does not have a statutory duty to provide parking within its boundaries, but does have the power to provide parking spaces under section 32 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 if it considers that it is necessary to relieve or prevent traffic congestion. Section 35 of that Act relates to conditions of use, charging and enforcement in relation to parking places. And Section 55 relates to accounting for the income and expenditure. This section is quite clear and that does not include off-street parking income other than enforcement in car parks. Now, although not addressed in the report, Section 93 of the Local Government Act 2003 provides for the power to charge for discretionary services, and car parks are such a service. Paragraphs 15 to 23 of the statutory guidance for this Act covers how the cost of a discretionary service should be calculated. It requires that we need to establish a robust methodology, which we have in drawing up the data on Appendix D, and it confirms that we can include the cost of financing at any capital investment, and also an allocation of overheads and other non-chargeable central costs, such as the cost of corporate and democratic core functions. There is no definition of the service, and there is scope for a reasonably broad approach so that the cost can cover a wide range of service-related expenditure. The guidance also says that income and expenditure can be forecast over a 3-year period and longer for capital investment. Our report today explains that we do and will continue to conform with the provisions of both Acts. So in summary, as I've said several times before, this really shouldn't be a party political issue. And looking around the country, it isn't. I will repeat what I said in the April Cabinet meeting. Nearly all councils of all political colours charge for parking, with very few having any form of so-called free parking. I talked to many council leaders, and I discussed this again with them at the DCN conference earlier this year. All, irrespective of party, don't understand what all the fuss is about. Yes, residents have concerns, but these could apply to any town, and no one has yet expressed a concern that is unique to our towns. If they had any foundation, then it would be impossible for any council to charge for parking. It is interesting that one of the few remaining councils in the region with free parking, Breckland, 2 weeks ago voted to implement parking charges. They cite all the reasons we have cited, both financial and non-financial. Interestingly, they say that the cost of providing the service is about £450,000, an eerily familiar number. I will quote their cabinet member: "The cost burden should not be carried by those who do not use the service. It is not right that everyone pays. The tariffs mean that we can allocate money from council taxes towards other services." Breckland is a Conservative council. I have quoted from a Conservative cabinet member, but it could just as easily have come from a Labour, Lib Dem, Green or Independent cabinet member. The difference is between administration and opposition. In administration, you have to be responsible, look after the finances, and yes, make difficult decisions for the benefit of all. Finally, I would like to thank Mark Ems, Matt Smith, Jack Burton and Catherine Davis for the huge amount of work they've put into the reports that have been considered at 3 Cabinet and 2 ONS committee meetings. They must be congratulated, and their support and patience is really appreciated. No policy has had such detail provided and received so much scrutiny, so we know that the decisions we have made earlier this year and will make today are the most informed any Babergh cabinet has ever made. As is customary, we have a number of recommendations presented to us today. These are provided in section 3 of the report, and today's debate and vote will confirm if we agree to them. I know that recommendation 3.2, which states that we won't implement a 1-hour free period, is controversial, and that there are those who believe that the way it is worded is predetermination. I would like to remind the public that we always have recommendations. They are the starting point for debate. That is how Cabinet and Council work. Now I'd like to propose the recommendations, and also that we reaffirm the recommendations from our meeting of 8th of April, which can be found in Appendix B. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Davis, thank you. Right, we'll now move to questions from members, cabinet members. And could I reiterate, I am looking for questions. And 1 question at a time, please. So, who has got questions? Councillor Davis, thank you.
That was a very thorough introduction, but I still have a question. Is it true to say that there will still be some free parking available in both Hadley and Sudbury, even if we do not have a 1-hour free option? If so, do we know how many free spaces there will be in each town?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. And the answer is yes, there'll be quite a number of free spaces in both towns. In Sudbury, we've got Ballingdon Street and Stour Street car parks will be free all day. That's a total of 53 spaces. Market Hill has 56 1-hour limit parking spaces. and there are some others elsewhere close to the town centre and in other streets. So the ones I've spoken about so far, Ballington Street, Store Street and Market Hill, that's a total of 109 spaces, and as I said, plus other on-street spaces. In Hadley, there's Bridge Street car park, which I think has about 62 spaces. So again, a large number of all-day free parking will be available in Hadley, not to mention the on-street parking there as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Sally Davies.
Yeah, we're not quite, there is still a forecast gap between the costs of the car parking and the revenue we are going to get from car parking charges if we pass them today. Do we yet have a view as to where savings can be made in the car park expenditure to achieve the goal of full cost recovery for our car parks here?
I might need to get the Director of Operations to help on this, but yeah, in our model, you'll see in Appendix D, we've got the model does show the total expenditure, total income, but it is only a model. What happens in practice, I'm sure, will undoubtedly differ from that model, but and it is showing that all options still leave us with a need to subsidise the service. But it is based on a thorough analysis of all the factors that do affect the numbers. But of course, expenditure may be less, income may be more, or it may be the other way around. The model does enable us, though, to understand the sensitivity of the numbers to individual items, and so we can look to where we can make savings to reduce that gap. I'm sure that Mark, are there specific items you feel that we already have an idea where we can start to reduce that the gap?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to commit to specific savings we can make. We obviously model the actual costs as they are to give you the full cost there and to develop the model. There might be savings come along, but this is quite a tight service with low level of actual resources in terms of people associated to the service. I think whilst we're putting the model together and the tariffs together, we've been mindful for our original commitment all the way from the end of last year, which is to benchmark locally, which we've done, to a 30-mile radius and set a set of tariffs that are lower than comparable rates in other local authorities. So that's been our first objective. We've put the model together and we stand by the model and have answered a lot of questions on the model. But until we're actually in full operation, it remains to be seen what the actual difference is, and that is obviously subject to sensitivity in either direction.
Thanks, Mark. And of course, as we can see from the numbers here, that the gap is greater for option C than the other two options, and so it's going to be that much more difficult to bridge for that option than it would be for the other options.
Councillor Carter.
So for clarity and transparency, would you say that Babergh are looking to leverage income from parking revenues under tariff option A to enhance the overall budget and meet broader service needs? Because we know, and is also stated in 7.5 of the report, that any income generated through fees and charges must be spent within that service area. So parking charges must be used for parking services. Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, the income that we receive will definitely be channeled towards parking services, because it will be going to reduce the expenditure or offset against the expenditure. At the moment, we're not forecasting any profit from this, but should we get in a situation where we can make some additional income from that covers the expenditure that we've outlined in Appendix D, then we can use that for parking and transport and highways related activities. So there is a broad range of things that we can use parking income for that would be conformant with legislation.
So is that what you're looking to do? Is that your overall aim?
The overall aim is hopefully, yes, because we have ambitions, particularly with financing things in the LC WIP and other things that we would like to see. We've got aspirations, and obviously all of us here know that we have those aspirations in our priorities in our plan for the district. So we do need to find income to support that, in addition to making sure that parking pays its way.
Any further questions? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, in discussion with Lavenham, they didn't seem to think there was any detriment on their tourist trade, or likely to be any detriment on tourist trade. Have we had any feedback from, say, Gainsborough House or the Arts Centre in Sudbury? How do they feel about it?
I think Councillor Saw, you've spoken to, yes. Would you like to pick up on that?
I have spoken with the Sudbury Arts Centre, and their concern was if there was charging after 6 p.m. and on weekends and bank holidays, which of course we are not recommending or suggesting. In fact, the information they gave me, they also gave me anecdotal information that their clientele, so to speak, weren't particularly worried about it. Only anecdotal.
So looking at the people who may be negatively affected if we don't agree to initiate an hour free parking, of which there are, I'm sure there will be many, but I'll concentrate on one. In 9.4 and 9.5, it states that mobile health trust nurses rely on access to public car parks, and that is now proposed to be charged, which would complicate their essential home visits and services. And given that has already been a recognition of the need to engage with health trusts to minimise administrative burdens related to parking, wouldn't maintaining the 1 hour free option not only support these vital healthcare workers, but also ensure that they can efficiently carry out their duties without incurring additional costs?
Thank you, Councillor Carter. We have discussed this with, I think, the ICB, who have stated that the health visitors are able to submit expenses that, to include parking charges. I think one of the issues is where that they are regularly using the same car park and whether a permit system, and I don't know whether they can submit expenses for permits. Mark, or Matt, is it something you could pick up on?
Yeah, I was going to add that I've already met with West Suffolk NHS Community Services on the 4th of July, and they did confirm exactly what you've just said, John, that their staff ordinarily, when they have to pay in other locations and other towns, they submit a claim every month. But we did identify a couple of locations where venues are located access from our car parks, and I'm going to continue to work with them to find solutions so that they can continue to do the important work that they do.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity and for procedural reasons, I wonder if we could just confirm that the recommendations we're addressing today are designed to address the call-in and the recommendations of overview and scrutiny, and that we will not be able to consider any further changes or amendments to the parking structure, the charging structure. The report we have before us is the report we have before us, and we can't be changing this. Could you confirm that?
In principle, yes, but if there are things that we feel that perhaps need further discussion and further working on with the Director of Operations, then we will do that. But at the moment, we've got the recommendations here, and I would like to see them taken as they stand.
If I could follow up, because I understand the point Councillor Ward is trying to make, it's that in the fullness of time, in development of any parking strategy, and we have a parking strategy, incidentally, which people seem to have occasionally forgotten maybe, we can change things. We will be able to change things in the future because situations change. But here today is the point I'm trying to make, is that we will not be making any changes to the parking charge structure beyond what has already been considered, taking into account the overview and scrutiny recommendations. That was the point I was hoping to get across.
Yeah, any further changes would require a more detailed financial analysis, and we're not in a position to do that within the confines of this meeting. So.
Councillor Carter.
Would you not say that keeping the 1 hour free parking option in tariff option C aligns with the council's focus on community support and accessibility?
I have my own personal views on this. I don't think that the 1 hour free option is something that is necessary to benefit different sectors of our communities, and we've got very small charges that we're proposing, just an hour for a pound, sorry, for 1 hour in most car parks. Yeah, or £1.50 or £2, but for the most part, you'll be able to find a pound for an hour. That's not an unreasonable tariff to set and an unreasonable expectation for what is a valuable service. We've looked at all of the various categories of vulnerable individuals, and we've covered that in the various parts of the report today. There's nothing that we have said or anything that we've found out or said in the report that should indicate that 1 hour free it is going to give us any kind of community benefit, given the fact that the tariffs we're setting is very low.
I disagree, but thank you.
I have a question, Councillor Ward. There has been quite a lot of comment about how much money we will actually receive from car parking and its contribution to our overall financial position. Could you perhaps give us some more detail about what else we are doing to bolster and improve our financial position, given the fact that with the change of government we don't actually know what government policy will be as regards local government?
Well, we've currently identified within our this year's budget £540,000 worth of savings, but there's a lot of further work, and it's currently ongoing work. I've been talking to the Section 151 officer and her team, and I know the Chief Executive and the SLT have been looking at various areas that they can make savings, further savings, changing the way we're doing things, changing how we do things in partnership with Mid-Suffolk, because that's a key part of our overall financial strategy and the savings we have made over many years and will continue to make. Over the next few months, a lot of this will become more clear and will be crystallised more. The medium-term financial plan is something that is being looked at in great detail going forward. But without this, that's going to make that task even more difficult, because you will see here, and it's quite clear on an Appendix D, that over the next 2.5 to 3 years, the cumulative benefit to our budget of implementing the tariff that we have got here in front of us is just under £1.9 million. And that's not a profit, that is a benefit to the budget. And those two things are different. It's still a slight loss, but a benefit to the budget nonetheless. And £1.9 million over that 2.5 year period is not something we can ignore.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Busby, then Councillor Carter.
Thanks. One of the things that we asked for, I think, in the consultation was that if we didn't increase the level of charging across the board on car parks, we would have to make even more savings, additional savings, to achieve a balanced budget. Did we get any ideas from those people that were against us introducing car parking charges as to how we would receive an equivalent amount of money?
No, there's been conspicuous silence on that particular subject.
Could I add something here, Councillor Busby? I was at a recent Sudbury Working Together meeting with the Chief Executive and Town Council members, and I did ask Sudbury Town Council members what they would suggest if we did not charge for car parking. The response I got from Councillor Beer and Councillor Barrett, who I see is in the chamber, was that we should cut the number of people that we employ. And my response to that is, with what impact to service delivery to our residents? Councillor Carter, you had a question.
Thank you. So at the last Cabinet meeting, we spoke about ANPR for doctors and dentists and school permits, etc. What will be the cost of these? What will be the maintenance, the initial setup, and everything that goes with it? And how does that compare to the cost of what it would be to have an hour free?
Matt, do you have the details for that?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Carter, did you say ANPR? So we wouldn't use ANPR as such. What we would use is a system that we've already got operating in mid-Suffolk, where you have a virtual pedestal. So you would go into the venue where you're going, whether it's the GP surgery or the leisure centre, you type in your registration number, and that would automatically be notified to the civil enforcement officer that vehicle can stay. It's a relatively cheap system. It's an initial purchase of approximately £500 per venue, and then that's it for life. Those systems are really robust and they don't require any sort of constant maintenance.
And what about the permits for school?
Could be a similar system, or we could look at a simple paper permit system, both relatively cheap, but whatever works best for the people who need them.
Ipswich Borough Council operates a system for schools, and that's fairly simple and straightforward to operate. We could do something very similar.
Would you like to make another question?
So there hasn't been a referendum on parking charges, but due to the petition that was created and collected in such a short space of time, considering that there were people who signed it that also weren't from the areas, but they weren't counted. And all the countless emails and phone calls I'm sure we've all had, is it not fair to say that there has been a cry out from residents and those who come into Babergh that they do not want to lose this? They wanted to keep the 3 hours, and now they really want to keep the 1 hour. And as a council, as their elected representatives, is it not our job to look at every option to see what can be done to save at least an hour?
There's bound to be quite a clamour on something like this. You're asking people to pay for something that they've never had to pay for before. And naturally, there's going to be kickback. We have, and we understand that there are pressures on people, but at the same time, as I've said, this is a valuable service. It can't be provided so-called for free. Nothing is for free. Somebody somewhere, sometime has to pay for it. And why not the person who uses it at the point of use? We've kept the charges very low. These are very, very modest charges, and these issues are the same as play out anywhere else in the country. and it's quite clear that modest charges, once people get used to them, are of no real problem whatsoever. Yeah, I do appreciate there's been a number of people, 8,000 odd, who signed the petition. If we would look at an alternative, and that is to raise council tax by however much it would be necessary to do so to cover the shortfall in terms of our paying for and subsidising our parking service, we would have to carry out a referendum across the whole district. We can't do it without doing that. That's the law. Now, we have about 76,000 adults in Babergh. So the 8,000 odd who signed the petition represents perhaps 11-12% of the population, adult population of Babergh. It'd be interesting to know what the rest of that adult population would vote for in a referendum, or indeed many of that 8,000 themselves. I cannot see that you get anything other than a very high, perhaps 80-90% rejection of that referendum. So this is simply a much better alternative than putting that burden across all of our residents in the district.
Can I come back to that with another question?
I can answer, Carter,
So
please.
carry on. If the council tax that is currently being used to subsidise the parking, if this all goes through, will council tax be lowered?
No, because all it would mean is that we would have less of a challenge when looking at our medium-term budget problems. It won't. Our council tax is, as I said earlier, very low anyway. We have budget challenges we have to address. Most councils have budget challenges. Most, certainly district and almost even more so county councils have budget challenges they have to address, and we're all facing similar pressures. The limits on council tax are not helping us, so we have to look at other things, and charging for discretionary services is simply a fair and equitable way of doing it.
Councillor Busby.
Sorry, it's just a point of order to correct John. You actually said that the people that use these car parks aren't used to paying for car parking. What they're not used to paying for car parking is here. If they go anywhere else, then they're quite happy to pay it.
Busby. Are there any further questions? Councillor Carter.
It's my last one, I promise. So can you please confirm, again, just for clarity and for transparency, that if we were to go for the 1 hour free option with the other charges that are being introduced, would you still claim back all your costs?
No. Appendix D is quite clear that none of the options there allows us to recover all of our costs. There is still a certain amount of subsidy. That subsidy is clearly the lowest with Appendix B, with option B, but we have ruled that out because the charges are significantly higher. And that subsidy is the highest with option C, with the 1 hour free. Option A, with the lower charges across the board, is effectively the compromise option. It allows us to address the shortfall and have a subsidy which we feel that we can close with a fair wind, and that doesn't give us the challenge that the 1 hour free would give us.
If there are no further questions from members of the Cabinet, we will move to questions from any other members present. Hold on a minute there. Councillor McLaren first. I will get to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions, actually, and both are about communication. Given the less than perfect communication with Cornart Parish Council, as we read that there was a mix-up, wasn't there, with the dates or something, are there lessons that need to be learned by Cabinet in relation to communications and actions that go out in their name?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I would say that we're always learning on communications. In hindsight, on a number of matters, not just this, we have realised that our communications haven't always been as good as they could be. It's a very difficult thing. We try and do the best we can. Sometimes we don't quite hit the spot and communicate with all of the stakeholders that we need to. But yes, we will clearly learn lessons from that.
My second question. As the recommendations before Cabinet today have engendered a very strong feeling amongst ward members, town and parish councils and the general public, are you considering some ongoing discourse with a representative group as to the progress and effectiveness should the recommendations be agreed today? Thank you.
Well, as we've said in the report, we will be monitoring the implementation in terms of not just the amount of income we get, but any impact it might have on the affected communities. But yes, as we've been in dialogue with Lavenham, and we've had a meeting with Great Cornard, Hadley now would like to talk to us, and we will talk to Hadley. And if Sudbury wishes to have a similar dialogue, then clearly we will do that. This is not something we fix now and forever, and there'll be no further change. This is clearly something that's going to have a very close monitoring and response to that monitoring to see what needs to be done to improve what we're implementing.
Sorry, I'll just come back. Yes, I was thinking of something formally being put into place that not just parish councils and town councils had an opportunity to comment, but thinking about the wider public, which I'm sure they're not watching today at this meeting, whether something could be put in place so that people can be assured publicly that the monitoring we understand, but do the public understand there's going to be some monitoring? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McLaren. Yes, we will take that on board and respond accordingly. But yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Councillor Carter's question about healthcare workers, the response was that those people who would be having to pay car parking charges in that group would be able to claim expenses. Now, if those expenses are being claimed from local businesses, this is going to be a tax on local businesses, another one. If it's from another local authority, as another statutory authority, it's going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, surely. So what is the point of that? So we're just taking money from other producers of money and wealth in this district, are we not?
Those healthcare workers already claiming expenses, and they're claiming it presumably from the ICB. Is that the case, Matt?
Yeah, it would be their employer, but which would be the NHS Trust or whichever department it is. But I thought I'd just add that I did make inquiries throughout all of our neighbouring districts, and none of them have a scheme for healthcare workers or nurses. So it's normal practice in those locations that they claim from their employer, but we would make extra efforts for car parks that are have access to other facilities, healthcare facilities, etc.
Yes, okay, Councillor Rees.
Thank you. Yes, so there isn't going to be the case that taxpayers will have to bear the burden of the so-called subsidy.
No, not at all. This is a matter, as Matt said, between the worker and their employer in terms of claiming back expenses, which they do in some of our car. If they're staying in a car park for over 3 hours, they already do that.
Right, Councillor Busby, and
Yes.
then I'll take a...
Taxpayers will bear the subsidy. We are now. I am paying for people in Sudbury and Hadley to park for nothing. So there's no difference. The money's got to come from somewhere. Babergh haven't got it. Babergh can't write money. They have to get money from taxpayers or from charging for services. This is a service. We need to charge for people that use the service. Why should somebody in Shotley or Brantham or Bergholt pay for people in Hadley and Sudbury to park for free when they're having to pay car parking charges wherever they go? We don't ask you to help us with our car parking charges in Ipswich and Colchester. I mean, we're talking about something that's about a third of a cup of coffee, a half a packet of Pringles, £1 for the privilege of parking in your town, which I'd like to think that you had pride in and think people would quite willingly pay £1 to park in your town.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Right, I'll take Councillor Dowling. I'll come back to you, Councillor Rees, but let's get as many councillors as possible to get their initial questions in, please.
It's actually a point of order, please. I feel that, contrary to what you requested earlier, I feel that I'm being personally attacked here by Councillor Busby. It's with reference to your town, my town. This is not personal, please, and I'm feeling that you're getting a little bit angry towards me personally. Thank you, Councillor.
I apologise if you take it that way. I'm certainly not.
Councillor Dowling, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the question earlier about the remaining free parking spaces in Sudbury and Hadley. In Hadley, Councillor Ward said that Bridge Street car park would continue to be free, giving about 60 spaces. I think he is as aware as I am that Bridge Street car park is allocated for phase 2 of the Corks Lane development and has plans to have houses built on it. So are you saying that phase 2 of Corks Lane is being cancelled?
We haven't made a decision yet on phase 2 of Corks Lane. We're looking to evaluate the completion of phase 1, but there are challenges with that site in terms of development because of the flooding on that site, as I'm sure you are aware, Councillor Dowling.
So in light of that, is it fair and reasonable to offer Bridge Street as the only free parking spaces left in Hadley when the future of Bridge Street is still in doubt?
Yes, at the moment it is, because at the moment we don't have any date which Bridge Street may or may not cease to be a car park. So at the moment Bridge Street offers about 60 parking spaces for the foreseeable future.
Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions, if I may, please. I mean, first of all, though, I'd just like to say that I was a bit concerned about the Cabinet members' comments earlier about the decision already being made and that nothing else is going to be changed. It feels like, in that case, is this a rubber stamping exercise? That was is this a rubber stamping exercise? That's the first question. Okay.
The main tariffs that you see in option A, we're not changing the numbers in that. We're not changing the numbers in options B or C. It's just a matter of deciding today as to whether we're going for option A or option C, because that's what we have been asked by Overview and Scrutiny Committee to do. Any of the other decisions that we've made at our previous Cabinet meeting on the 8th of April, we just want to confirm that we're still happy with the decisions that we made at that meeting. We're not intending to review those or to make any detailed changes to any of the numbers that we had agreed, apart from the one that relates to season tickets, which you'll see that we've covered in one of today's recommendations.
So I'll now go on to my prepared questions, if I may. And one comes from a resident, because there was no opportunity for residents to ask questions. And it's regarding the economic impact on high streets, and in Hadley's case, about the impact of Lidl being considered. This is a question from the resident, but it also feel, my question regarding this as well is, I don't feel that the economic impact on our high streets and our businesses in general has been considered, and I would like to know whether it has. But this is the question from the resident in this regard. Why, in researching car parking tariffs appropriate for Hadley, was no consideration given to the impact on the high street of a new Lidl store with free parking? The advent of the new Lidl store has been flagged for some time, yet it appears that no mention has been made of its impact on the Hadley High Street. Why would shoppers want to pay for an hour's parking when free parking is available at the eastern end of the town? Surely this strengthens the case for a special 1 hour free parking treatment in Babergh-owned car parks. If not, the Co-op, Ferguson's Deli, Adnams, and even the Friday market will be in danger of closing. So can I have an answer to the economic impact and the Lidl taking everything to the other side of town situation, please?
Firstly, as we've said many times before, and evidence from across the country backs this up, that the presence or absence of modest car parking charges has little or no impact on the economic viability of a town centre. The economic viability, the towns thrive or don't thrive based on their offer, and it depends on what the kind of shops we've got. And in both Hadley and Sudbury, there is a wide range of good independent stores and other attractions that bring people into those town centres. And the same goes for market towns everywhere. As I said earlier, if there was a direct, demonstrable and significant adverse impact, then no town anywhere would be able to charge for car parking. And clearly that doesn't happen. As to Lidl, the advent of Lidl is a new factor in Hadley, but there already is Morrison's. Morrison's and Lidl have their own particular offers, neither of which really compete with what goes on in the high street. There's Andrew's Butchers, you mentioned Ferguson's, you mentioned the Adnams store, you mentioned the market. People go to those because they want to go to those, and indeed other shops in Hadley. The various, there's a couple of haberdashery shops, there's other clothing shops. There's all sorts of shops there. Different things they sell. People go there for different purposes, and will still continue to do so. And I'm sure you and I, well, I know I do, and I'm sure you do the same, Councillor Grandon. I go to the Hadley High Street, shop in the shops there, and then on the way home I'll pop into Morrison's. And many people, probably most people, do exactly the same. So I doubt that Lidl will have any further impact other than the impact that Morrison's had, which is very little.
Can I just add here, there isn't a live planning application for a Lidl yet, though, and the economic impact of such will be a consideration as part of that planning application if one is received.
Right.
So,
may I go on to my next question, please?
not yet. I've got a question from Councillor Owen, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report states that the impact of charges will be monitored. Why not go for the option C and then monitor that?
Because it would bring us back to where we are now with the same kind of debate and same kind of arguments within about a year's time. There is no reason, no good reason to do that at this stage, because we've not identified any real reason why a 1 hour free option is going to adversely impact shoppers, residents, businesses, and it would just present us with further problems further down the line and not help, indeed hinder, our ability to sort out our finances. So I just see no justification for doing that.
Right, supplemental, carry on, Councillor Owen.
You won't know until you give it a go. You won't know until you give it a go. Give the hour a go and then come back to it. Come and support the towns. Support the towns with your hour free. That's what we're asking. And the villages around it. It's not just the towns. We have Acton, we have Great Waldingfield, we have Great Cornard, and they are great big villages. They're not just small villages. St Joseph's has parking for Babergh. Will cost £2 per day. That's £10 a week.
Councillor Owen, we're going to get to debate, and I need questions. No, well. Okay, where are we now? I'm getting confused myself. Right, Councillor Clover, then Councillor Riley, then Councillor Grandin, and I believe that Councillor Busby will have something to say as well.
I was just going to respond to Alison. The problem is, even with charging for the full no free period, we still can't hit a balanced budget. We're still way, way short of a balanced budget. There is one rule in council finance: you have to have a balanced budget. We have to do that. If we can't do it by charging for the first hour, there's no way we're going to do it by giving the first hour free. And nobody's come up with any other suggestions as to how we can fill that gap. When we've completed the exercise, which we will have to do by February to get our balanced budget, we may have missed it, magically come up with something which enables us to consider other options, perhaps. But we're way short of that at the moment. There's just no way we can think about it.
Right. Councillor Clover.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I have to correct Councillor Ward on his assertion that the first hour free will make no difference. It will make a tremendous difference. When we did the petition, and as you know, this is the biggest petition that Babergh has ever received, the number of people that said they come in because it's free, and they're coming in from all over. They're coming in from Chelmsford, they're coming in from Colchester, they're coming in from Clacton.
Am I getting a question soon, Councillor
Sorry, I'm just
Clover?
coming to that, yeah. But I just needed to correct that point. So, given that Lavenham Parish Council is still negotiating a separate arrangement with Babergh District Council, where the costs have yet to be finalised, including those of installing new machines, how is it possible to have any debate on the actual true costs when they have yet to be properly ascertained? The fact is the Cabinet do not know what the actual figures are, yet they are prepared to gamble with the livelihoods of the residents they represent and the economies of our local town and stakeholders. How can there be any justification in taking a decision now when the figures presented cannot be relied upon? For instance, if option C, first hour free, were to be introduced, the difference in income for option A for 25-26 is only 270,000. Are the Cabinet seriously saying that they are not prepared to invest this amount
Clover,
in their
am I
local
getting a question
This
here?
is a question.
It is a question, right.
Are the Cabinet seriously saying that they are not prepared to invest this amount in their local towns? Isn't it the case that the Cabinet are just being greedy when option C is still viable? I urge the Cabinet to consider option C. It was.
Yeah, I'm just trying to dig out the questions from that. There was one about machines, I think. The machines are already in place. but that was extended to a question about the overall costs and not knowing those costs. Well, we do know the costs. There's been a huge amount of work putting into the model behind the spreadsheet you see in Appendix D. So to keep suggesting that we haven't worked on the costs and don't know them is completely disingenuous. Option C, as I have stated earlier, puts an additional burden on us over that 2.5-year period of just under £644,000. It is an unnecessary burden. It's not a question of not investing in our towns and in our local economies. We're talking about very modest charges. 1 hour, £1 in a short stay car park. It's not going to have an impact on anyone's shopping behaviour. If somebody is going into town to shop for an hour, they'll be quite happy to spend just £1. It's nothing. And to suggest, and I know what people will say in response to a prompt in a survey and a petition in the high street, but their behaviour will be different in reality, in practice. These charges are not excessive. They're not going to have an impact on people's behaviour, but they will have a huge impact on our ability to run this council. It's not, I just simply refute some of the statements you've made there, Councillor Clover. There's no basis for them.
I'm going to ask, I know I'm trying to get all of you to get all your questions in. Now, I believe that Councillor Riley was next, then I will come back to I will go to Councillor Smith, who hasn't had a question yet, then I'll come back to Councillor Clover, then to Councillor Grandon. Right.
My first question, I have two questions, very short ones. First one is an admin question. Am I right in thinking that we make this decision, you make this decision today, it cannot be revisited for at least 6 months? Yeah, it is. So, there are no changes for at least 6 months. My second question, Madam Chairman, it actually is addressed to you, which is, do you think that is rather a conceit or a myth put about by the executive of Babergh that any staff reductions is a reduction in services to our taxpayers and residents, and that all our staff are working to the advantage of the residents? End of question. Do you brought it up.
I will be totally pleased to answer your question, Councillor Riley. You will be aware that we have already made some changes to the senior leadership team and not filled all the vacancies in that. I do believe that our staff are working for the benefit of our residents, and we should also remember that our staff, our officers, are shared between ourselves and Mid-Suffolk. And I have to say that when Councillors Beer and Barrett, Councillor Beers and Councillor Barrett have been the only people who have ever told me what they thought should be done instead of free car parking. So at least I would commend them for that, because at least they have come up with an alternative. I do think that in areas there will be an impact on service delivery if we make the reductions in staffing that people seem to think is the answer to our problem. We are, of course, making changes in our housing provision with our direct labour organisation, which is also is in train at the moment. So I hope I've answered your question. Oh yes, and the Chief Executive will now add.
unusual for me to add, but I think as Councillor Riley mentioned, the staff, it would be appropriate for me to do so. So just to reassure everyone in this room and everyone outside of this room that every single officer that you employ is always working in the best interests of the residents of Babergh and Mid-Suffolk at all times. That's never in doubt. As far as I'm concerned. And clearly we don't employ anyone who's working directly against the best interests of residents, in the same way that councillors are all operating in the best interests of residents, but that there will be different views as to what's most important. And I suppose the point I would wish to make is that there are ultimately political decisions as to what services, outside of the statutory ones of course, what services you believe are most critical, collectively, for the residents of Babergh. And that's what determines, as a result, what officers we can afford to employ and what services we deliver. So there are choices always in terms of certain services. And ultimately, I believe that's the point the leader is making, is that what we've not heard and I've not heard are what some of those other choices are. But I can also reassure you, as the leader was saying, that we are actively making savings in year and in future years based on our future budget forecasts in any event, because clearly, outside of any debate today, there will be further savings that the councils have to make, subject to any saving white horse coming over the horizon from the government, which I don't think we should be waiting for, because it's not going to happen.
I think we'd all agree with that. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. Over the years, we have made huge savings and will continue to do so, as indeed have all councils. We've had to, because of the restrictions imposed on us by central government for a number of years. Local government is probably the leanest, most efficient part of the public sector, if only Whitehall departments would follow suit. There is no fat that can be cut.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Right, Councillor Smith, and then I'll be coming back to you, Councillor Clover, and then Councillor Grandin, and then Councillor Owen. Right, here we go.
Thank you. You keep talking about the very modest charge of £1 and how low the tariff is, but last week at Full Council we had the State of the District report, which showed that in our district we've got a high level of car dependency and a high proportion of older residents. It's a rural area. People come to town several times a week often to park their cars, not just for shopping. It's for their social life, to combat loneliness, medical needs, pop to the pharmacy to pick up your prescription. There's lots of reasons why people use car parks multiple times a week. How will option A benefit residents?
It will simply allow us to continue to provide parking.
May I come back?
You may, Councillor Smith.
If we don't implement option A, what will happen? What's the alternative?
Well, ultimately, parking is a discretionary service. If we can't afford it, we can't deliver it. We need to be, as I said, the service needs to be resilient and sustainable, and we've got to be able to do that, and we have to, therefore, put in these modest charges, as indeed councils up and down the country do, in order to provide that service to the residents.
Fair enough. Why not option C?
Because of the vastly reduced income, we're forecasting a significant reduction in that income, and it's quite possible that the forecast for option C will actually be lower than we've got here in Appendix D, simply because it will encourage people to just rush in, rush out for an hour to avoid having to pay at all. And we do need investment in our car parks. We've got the upkeep of the car parks. It's not just a matter of keeping the surfaces and the white lines and everything else, but we do need to make sure that they are safe environments, and that there aren't any other problems, accidents, that sort of thing that happen in our car parks. So they need that investment so that we can provide the kind of car parks that people want and expect.
Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to, again, this statement about there will be no impact. From our own council here, I've got figures that the downturn for short term has been factored in as 10% and for long stay 20%. So there clearly is admission that there will be an impact here. This contradicts the fact that we're saying that we can't have an impact economic assessment on impact because no template exists. So it has to be one or the other. Looking at the budget book and then comparing with option A, why do these figures rise so exponentially? They appear to be overly inflated. In 25-26, option A rises by 250k. Why is equipment fees and enforcement rising by so much? Why is corporate overhead and public realm rising by so much? Can we trust these figures?
Well, the answer is yes, we can trust these figures because a lot of time and effort has gone into preparing them. But in terms of the specific questions you have asked, perhaps I can get one of the officers to respond. Is that something, Jack, that you could pick up on?
Yes, afternoon, Councillor Clover. Sorry, you may have to repeat yourself. There was a few things there, but a few areas that I did pick up on. I think you were comparing 24-25 and 25-26. You must remember that the 24-25 column is a half year. So the 25-26 is the first full year. So you must consider that. I think you also referred to the differing budget book figure and the full cost recovery figure. So I think initially when we first met as a cabinet on this for this year, our published budget book figure was this 425k that was quite well communicated. That is what that service published budget figure is, but it doesn't incorporate all of the other resources like your environmental, travel, your public realm grounds maintenance. That full cost column incorporates all of those, whereas the budget book figure is just the car park management and income collection in isolation. Was there anything else that I've missed, Councillor Clover?
No, I think that's understood. I'm just querying why is it such a big, large leap? Because it seems that we're actually paying a heck of a lot to achieve a little when you look at the base where we're starting from. Is there a real benefit when we're considering the impact on residents and town centres?
Mark Ems, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think sort of from a benefit perspective, the benefit was what Councillor Ward stated earlier on, 1.9 million bottom line benefit over the 2.5 years in the model. That was the benefit. It's significant, but yes, when we look at it on a full cost recovery basis, as opposed to what the published budget book figures are, the costs are more expensive, but then also the income is not there at that level as well. And I suspect that if you analysed or asked these same questions to Brecon Council that are going through this process at the moment, they would have the same conversations and same challenges that we're having here.
Okay, thank you. It's just that if the figures are correct, and we know from previous experience, with building services, for instance, where what we've tended to overestimate the savings and underestimate the costs. Thank you.
Mark, would you like to add something?
I suppose only just a final response to that. Is it overestimate of savings, underestimate of costs, or what you're saying, could it be a better position than what it is? Then yes, the model is subject to sensitivity, but as was pointed out earlier, the model falls short of achieving full cost recovery, so it's still about 20% less overall than full cost recovery. So if the income is higher or the cost lower or any combination of that, it would have to be out by a factor of 20% to actually outperform full cost recovery. Then we'd be in a scenario where we're looking at how we control surpluses around there in respect of general fund and spending.
Thank you, Councillor Clover. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Grandin and then Councillor Owen.
Thank you. And before I get to my question, I'd just like to mention a couple of points that have been mentioned earlier. Firstly, Councillor Smith, I agree with what she said.
Is there a question coming?
There will be.
Good.
These are not modest. These are not modest charges. A pint of milk at the co-op is 85p. A loaf of bread at the co-op, 45p. And if you compare the all-day parking in Babergh, the planned charges, there's only 50 pence difference to parking in Bury St Edmunds at Rams Meadow. So how can we say that these are good value and modest? They're not.
This is your question, right?
We can say that because we benchmarked them against other towns.
Well, we can't have done because
we
it's
have
poor
benchmarked them
value.
against, and that benchmark was provided in the Cabinet report of the 8th of April.
The other point I was just going to mention.
A question?
Yes, there will be. Councillor Ward has mentioned a couple of times Hadley Town Council wanting to meet with them. That was mentioned in passing in an email which was actually very, very critical and against all the implementation of charges. You've pinned yourself on a passing point where they said, and we'd like to meet up. But actually, nearly all the points from Hadley Town Council were very, very much against the parking charges. So can you tell me why you just pinned yourself on that and didn't answer any of their questions?
Yes, I can answer that, Councillor Grandon. We received the email from Hadley Town Council yesterday. We've not had time to evaluate it properly, so it would be inappropriate for me to comment on any of the content of that email in this meeting. It was received simply too late. Hadley Town Council could have sent it to us many weeks, many months ago, but chose to send it yesterday.
And my further question, if I may, is Babergh runs many discretionary services, but they've chosen to cut this one. I mean, there are fun days and holiday clubs and all sorts of things that are discretionary, which benefit only a small part of our residents. Why are we running things like that, for example, and there are many others, when this would benefit all the businesses, the whole vibrancy of our district and all the residents, and many residents, both rural and towns, when things like, just for example, the discretionary fun days, holiday clubs and other similar things only benefit a very small number of our residents.
You're making the assertion that our business viability and our towns thrive on free parking and free parking only. That is not one that we recognise or accept. And secondly, are you really suggesting that we should cut the holiday activities for our children in order to maintain free parking for residents who could quite easily afford to pay £1 to go shopping?
Thank you. Councillor McGraw.
Just a point of order, Chair, if I may. I'm long experience of being in Cabinet, outside Cabinet, examining Cabinet. I think it's distressing that so many of the other members are using the opportunity of questions addressing the paper and to bring up, one, items that have no relationship to the paper, and two, to make debating points when, in fact, and again I have to accept this, that members are not going to be involved in the debate. This is a Cabinet meeting, not a full council meeting. So, as a point of order, could I ask that people restrain themselves from bringing in actually matters of sheer irrelevance?
Point taken. Right. I'm trying to make sure I don't lose. Yes, Councillor Owen.
Thank you very much, Chair. I can't quite understand the public realm costs because, to me, all in the car parks there's bins. So can I be explained what the public realm costs are, please? Probably to...
Certainly, I'm sure the officers would
ask Mark to
do
pick
that.
up on that.
Yes, it's the full calculated. Our car parks, we have paid car parks, we have unpaid car parks. There is sweeping, street sweeping required in there. There's elements of grounds maintenance required in there. In the winter, there's gritting required. There's a range of operations, trees that need to be cut back, surveys that need to be carried out. There's a lot of stuff that goes on from a public realm perspective. It just wasn't included in the published budget book figures, so it's been included in the full cost recovery. And it's not just there are other car parks other than just the charge for car parks that we're managing as part of that as well.
Any further questions? Oh, of course. Councillor Rees, and then Councillor Clover, and then Councillor Grandin.
Thank you, Chair. This, I suppose, is along the same vein as Councillor Grandin's recent question, but perhaps put a little bit more neutrally. There are other discretionary services that are provided for that not all residents use, and we pay towards those. These are areas which the administration considers money well spent on investing in our communities. So why is it then that all along it's been the case when describing the car parking situation that it's described always as a subsidy? It's the only one that seems to be described as a subsidy of the discretionary services because people want to push it through, because it's a subsidy, it's not seen as an investment. So why is it not seen as an investment in our economy, our local economy, and an investment in our communities in the same way as some of these other discretionary things mentioned by Councillor Grandin, for better or worse? Thank you, Chair.
As you remember from our budget debate back in February, we are moving towards full cost recovery for as many of our discretionary services as we can. We've taken the view that some of our community-based services, because of the nature of them, it wouldn't be feasible or practical to put on a charge, and B, in terms of things like, as we've already discussed, the activities for children, it would be highly inappropriate to put on a charge for those. Also, the amount of money that you would raise from those would be relatively small. This is our largest discretionary service in terms of cost by a long, long way. And it is only appropriate that it starts to pay its way. And as I said, this is not something that is unique to us. This is something that councils up and down the country are facing and are having to address. Most, nearly all, charge for parking, quite rightly so. And you heard me quote from the Breckland cabinet member earlier in terms of why should everyone have to subsidise a service, why not the users pay? And that is quite right. And this is something that we're all having to do, irrespective of the political colour of the administration. So it's, as far as we're concerned, it is a reasonable thing to ask our residents to do, and our visitors, the people who come into the district, who have paid no other contribution towards Babergh, to pay £1, just £1, to park your car for 1 hour.
Yes, Councillor Rees.
Councillor Ward, may I please ask why you consider why it's not appropriate to ask children to pay a modest amount towards holiday activities? Are you saying that we ought to be training them to think that they don't ever have to pay towards anything at all?
Councillor Rees, the HAF fund is for children who are in receipt of free school meals. So their parents' economic situation is such that they cannot pay, and neither should they.
And this money, the HAF money, and the councillor saw is right, it's for the less well-off in our district. And you want to attack children, you want to attack those families, that's disgraceful. That money, but that's exactly what you're doing. You can try to shake your head, but that's exactly what you're doing. It's disgraceful. And it's also, the money doesn't just come from Babergh. The officer time, yes, that's Babergh's, but the funding comes from other sources as well. So, quite frankly, I mean, I know I've heard say before, oh, let's get rid of the leisure centres as an alternative. No, exactly as everything's been pointed out. So I think you need to do a bit more research, especially into the holiday activity funding.
Right, can we don't want to get into debate here. There will be an opportunity for debate. So, Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the point I want to raise here is really, we've just had a change of government, and we know that there's potentially more funding coming through here. Isn't there a danger that we're rushing a decision when, in a few months' time, we'll have a better understanding of what's possible, and a reset will be required?
I think, Councillor Ward, before you reply, Councillor McGore.
I think anybody reading the press and the local government press and listening to Rachel Reeves, the Deputy Prime Minister responsible for the ministry that governs us. Now, I'm glad to say, including the word local government again, it's quite clear that we don't have any certainty about increased funding. If anything, quite the reverse. We are expecting to find our situation possibly getting worse. So, no time to wait. This is something we've considered for a great deal of time, many years, in fact. But in this particular instance, it has been through 3 cabinet meetings. Is this the 4th or the 3rd? This is the 3rd, and 2 overview and scrutiny meetings and call-ins. I commend overview and scrutiny for doing what they did, but there's no way we can look forward to sunlit uplands from central government.
There is quite a hole in the finances that they've found. Right, Councillor Grandon.
Thank you. The fund days are open to anyone, by the way. But my question might be best addressed to officers. I'm not quite sure. I'm a bit concerned that in the paper, I'll go back a bit. We've long had a problem in Hadley, and I would think it may apply to our other towns and villages too, regarding school drop-offs and pick-ups. In Hadley, I can only speak for my own area, we've been long trying to encourage parents and guardians to use the car park and walk the short distance, because there's been a great impact on neighbouring streets and residents when they try and park near the schools themselves. And in the report, it suggests a scheme where only certain people on certain benefits will be able to use the car park at no charge. As I said, we've been trying all these years and years, ever since I've been a councillor, to encourage them to use the car park. Finally, I was delighted to see that it's not a very big number. A small number of them are now using the car park. I find I would hope that you might find another way of encouraging people for that short period of time to use, or parents and guardians, to use the car park for pick-up and drop-off, perhaps by the school issuing some kind of agreed voucher system, but that is not discriminatory, that will encourage them to use the car park
not discourage
Thank
them,
you,
because
Councillor
I'm just
Grandin.
trying to make
I'm sure
progress.
Mark Ames has got a response.
Please could you tell me whether you might consider re-looking at that?
Sorry, Councillor Grandin, first of all, that's probably best addressed to me before it goes to the Director of Operations. I think that what you're asking is for Cabinet to discuss and debate further options for parent parking in car parks. And we're quite happy to raise and to discuss this when we come to debate. And I think I'd rather leave it to that and wait to hear what the Cabinet has to say about this particular matter.
Yes, of course.
But I will at this point state that, again, you have not come up with something that is unique to Hadley. There are schools in every town.
Sudbury
there are
and
parents
so on
in
as
every
well,
town.
yes.
So we still haven't come up.
Sudbury and Levenham, I'm sure, have the same problem.
Yes, so we still haven't yet found anything that makes our towns unique in England.
Mark.
Yeah, sorry, I was just answering that one, Councillor Grandin. As I advised you at the overview and scrutiny meeting with the call-in, then we're not intending to means test that at the primary school in Hadley, so we can put that scheme in place. Matt's made that sort of type scheme work in another authority that he's been with, so we can definitely bring that in. Just as means of a slight supplementary answer, interesting one, but just to point out as well, the rollback of the season ticket permit prices to £250 makes it possible for people to park for £1 all day. So if people they can't get one of those permits, or they want to visit on 2 occasions or multiple occasions in different car parks in different areas, they'll be able to park for £1 per day under that season ticket price across car parks. That's what it equates to at £250 per year, but that can also be purchased on a monthly, 3-monthly, 6-monthly basis as well.
The parents I spoke to during the survey said they're not prepared to do that. They said they're going to park in the road.
Right. If there are no further questions, we will move. I will now open up the item for debate. Councillor McGraw.
This is less of a debating point. I'm glad that we've moved on to a point where we can. I'd just like to correct myself from earlier when I referred to Rachel Reeves. I actually should have said Angela Rayner, but Rachel Reeves has got quite a big say in where money's coming from. Anyway, I apologise for that. This matter has been looked at. I've referred to many times how many times this go-round, if you like, we've looked at this. Every single point raised today has been discussed at Cabinet, at overview and scrutiny, at the call-in, not once or twice, but several times, over a period of years. It's interesting to note that a compromise offered some years ago, which might have included a certain limited period of free parking, possibly an hour, was roundly rejected by some of the people I hear asking questions, well, sometimes asking questions today. That time has gone. Bird has flown. We are in this financial situation now, and we have a responsibility to balance our budget, as Councillor Busby has referred to. I don't think we've got any option. When we look at the recommendations, a small concession has been made in keeping the season ticket prices held at their current rate. The 1 hour tariff, which has occupied so many people's minds, has been looked at and is referred to in a great extent in the report. Option A is the only possible decision for us to make. Now, we've had said in future we'll be looking at possible variations, and we'll be looking at the data that we receive. That data can only be received by actually implementing the proposed changes under tariff option A. We're keeping our options open as well with health trusts, although it's point to make that no other nearby council is doing anything similar in such a scheme. So I think there's no question that the Cabinet should be voting for this long overdue proposal so that we can actually address the serious problem we have, which is actually making the council functional. This is almost existential, and if we don't recognise that, we are failing in our duty. I shall be voting for it, and I'd like the vote to be taking place as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor, but I'm sure other members would wish to contribute to the debate. Are there any other members who wish to say something? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. If I can just come back to a couple of things that have been said. So it was mentioned by Councillor Ward a couple of times that this is what councils are doing up and down the country. And no offence, but quite frankly, I don't care what other councils are doing. We have the opportunity to help our businesses, to support our high street, our community groups, our residents, our residential parking, which in Sudbury, Hadley and Lavenham is atrocious. And that is what we should be doing. We should be supporting them. My second point was a point that you raised, Councillor Saw, about people coming up with alternatives. But it's not up to residents or towns or parish councillors to come up with these alternatives as to where the money would come from. That's our job, and that's what we should be doing. So thirdly, Councillor Clover mentioned about the impact, and he is very right. It states in black and white that there will be an impact, and we know that there's going to be an impact on the high streets, on the local businesses, and therefore on the economy. As Councillor Smith mentioned, on our community groups, on the social groups, social lives, so in turn that will impact people's well-being, their mental health, their even possible loneliness. And then lastly, the point that was made about the vibrancy of our towns, and we don't believe that, you don't believe that that is down to car parking being free, but it is a huge incentive for people, not necessarily in Sudbury, Hadley, Lavenham, but for those outside of those areas to say, well, where shall I go shopping today? Where shall I go to the markets? If they're having to pay just a fraction more to go to somewhere like Bury, Braintree, Colchester, Ipswich, why wouldn't they go there? They've told me, as I'm sure that they've told you, that that is what they will be doing, because it offers more. And if I can just mention, in the report, it mentions quite a lot about those on low income, which I'm thankful for, and I imagine was because of my spiel at the last cabinet meeting about this. But what it doesn't say in there is those in the just about managing category who don't qualify for benefits and who are barely scraping by, and the impact that it will have on them. And that's all I have to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Are there any further contributions? Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple of the points have already been raised, but it's worth going over again, I think. This is a new paper, new cabinet, new administration, new paper. But I remember in a previous administration when this, Councillor Busby, Councillor Ward and myself were discussing the initial getting rid of subsidies, or certainly cutting down on the subsidies, and that's what they are, they're subsidies. And I remember at the time it was Councillor Busby that actually suggested, okay, look, rather than get rid of it completely, why don't we try and ease it in and have an hour free and then do the other charges. I totally supported that at the time. However, for lots of different reasons, the delaying tactics, the blocking and everything else, that didn't happen. And as Councillor McCraw has said, those days are gone. Our balance in the budget has got far, far worse. You know, and the car parking, the lack of income from car parking has cost Babergh residents, your residents, my residents, all our residents, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pounds. So unfortunately, while an hour free has its benefits, but as has been pointed out, also has a lot of negatives, that's just not there. Certainly being considered, it was considered over in scrutiny, and a lot of other points were taken up on that. And the thing about residents, it's really good to see, you know, councillors here representing their wards. They're representing their wards, you know, a little bit of posturing, a little bit of showboating, a little bit of sticking up for their wards. But we as a cabinet have to represent the whole of the district. Personally, my ward, happy to see the end of the subsidies because they've been paying for donkey's years. And there's ex-councillors that have been in touch and saying, well done, it's about time. So it's the whole of the district. It's not just your individual towns, you know, but I do understand it. Probably if I was a representative of one of your towns, I'd be doing the same, but I wouldn't be on the cabinet, obviously. And the other thing about, you know, finding the money somewhere else, we'd love to. But that all the money isn't just handed out willy-nilly. Health and wellbeing strategy is part of the holiday activity fund. All the money that we have, the leisure centres, you know, great cost to us, but benefit in a whole range of all of our residents. I don't go to Hadley Leisure Centre and I don't go to Sudbury Leisure Centre because it's just too far. You know, it's just too far, so I don't go to those. But all those people in those towns, you benefit from that. And again, that's another subsidy which we have to pay. But it benefits the whole of the district. It benefits the whole of the district. And also, going to the car parks, Councillor Clover said that people came from Chelmsford just because now it's free parking. Seriously? So you're going to drive 80, 90 miles at the cost of fuel, yeah, just to save £1 in the car park? Come on. No one thinks that's realistic. Not realistic at the slightest. People go to Hadley or Sudbury or Lavenham, especially, and other towns, because of what's on offer. You shouldn't do your businesses down. You shouldn't do your shops down. They're a good offer. People will go and they'll pay the £1. So to suggest that they only go because it's free parking, sorry, just don't buy that at all. Don't buy it at all. Sorry. This is not debating you, Councillor Clover. This is a cabinet, okay? And I'm having my say now. You've had your say when it should have been a question. Right, and they're the points. It's the decision for the benefit of the whole of Babergh. We need to balance the books. Councillor Ward's absolutely right. Personally, I think the officers have done an amazing job. This is a really, really difficult paper. The amount of work that's gone into it, the amount of detail and the costings and everything else like that, absolutely fantastic. Councillor Barrett, it's on YouTube anyway, so you know, you're just wasting your phone battery.
Not a councillor anymore.
Well, ex-councillor, yeah, forgot, yeah, ex, yeah. So well done to the officers. Thank you for all your hard work. It's been a long, hard process, but we're now coming towards the end, hopefully. And as you can tell, I seconded the motion, and I will be voting for it.
Any further contributions from Cabinet? Councillor Davies.
For me, these modest changes are a compromise already. Yes. We could have gone for full cost recovery, but we didn't. We've already compromised with the level of charges that we're proposing. We've also made several amendments to help with health workers and possibly school children and their families. We've made an awful lot of changes to this. We've taken on board the concerns. We've examined all the figures and options thoroughly, and I trust the figures. I trust the figures that the officers have produced to us. They are very thorough, and we've been over them so many times, and I have listened to the arguments so many times. I've looked at the responses to the overview and scrutiny recommendations, and I remain of the view that we must introduce these charges. It's a difficult decision, and in some places it will be unpopular, but when you're in our position, we're not here to be popular, we're here to make decisions for the good of the whole district, and I agree with Councillor McCraw, this is existential. I don't think we have any choice but to impose these charges to keep our finances and indeed our whole council in a sustainable position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Right, if then, Councillor Ward.
I just wanted to say a final few words
please.
before we
conclude this.
Yeah, please.
Just to pick up on one or two things that have been said. People say things but behave very differently in practice. I really can't see that people won't go to our towns just because we're charging them £1 a park. The shops we provide are very good shops, they're interesting shops, a variety of shops. Just to come back to this business about people travelling from Chelmsford and places like that, yes, there are people that travel long distances, but I know specifically in Hadley that people travel long distances to go to the Adnams store, because it's only one of 2 or 3 in the county. They travel long distances to go to Yarnworks, apparently. They will still travel and they'll still pay £1 because they want to go to those shops. The just about managing. I do have sympathy there, Councillor Carter, with the just about managing, and we do want to make sure that we don't put on any greater financial burden because that they are living hand to mouth. And that's why we've tried to keep these charges as low as possible. Again, £1 hopefully will not have an impact on the just about managing. But we are going to be monitoring this and we will be very careful, mindful and sensitive to the needs of those residents. Lastly, I just wanted to pick up on this constant refrain about helping our businesses or harming our businesses or whatever. You have to remember our businesses already get quite a bit of support in terms of business rates relief. Many, if not most, of our high street businesses get anything between 75% and 100% relief on business rates. That helps them far more than anything that we're doing on car parking charges may have an adverse effect, and I don't think it would. So to suggest we're not helping our businesses is disingenuous and quite offensive. We are. There's probably not much more I can say, and you've probably heard too much from me already today, so I think that's about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Right. Okay, finally, Councillor Carter and then Councillor Busby.
Sorry, I feel like this is winding up. I think I hear a little bit of frustration from councillors everywhere, and there were things I wanted to mention about, I suppose, the impact it's going to have on residential streets, how residential streets are already blocked up and how they're going to get more blocked up, and how emergency services aren't going to get through. Talking about supporting small businesses, Councillor Ward just mentioned about the business rates relief, and that is great. But as an ex-small business owner, when I moved from Ipswich to Sudbury, having customers come to me in Sudbury and say, "Wow, the parking is free here. I will come back." It's not quite as far as Chelmsford, but it did happen, and that is a large incentive for lots of people. I think I've made it quite clear through these meetings how I feel about this, and I suppose I would just urge Cabinet to really monitor the effects of what will happen if this does go through, and if it does look too awful, to consider re-looking at this. And I also just wanted to request, before a vote is taken, I don't know if I can, but if 3.1, my computer's gone off, if 3.1 and 3.4 could be taken separately. I think I've got the right numbers there, sorry, bear with me.
Just for clarity, so Councillor Carter, were you asking for a separate vote on 3.1 and a separate vote on 3.4?
But if they could be taken together and then the others could be taken together.
The 3.1 and 3.4 together, and then 3.2, 3.3 and 3.5 separately?
Yeah.
I'm just going to check with the colleagues whether that's possible to do on the system. Yeah, so we can do that, just bear with us.
Oh yeah, if anyone will second it.
I think it's within the Chairman's discretion.
Yes, we can do that, Councillor Carter. It will take the Governance Officer a little bit of time to reconfigure the...
Yeah, just to say that when I said that we're looking for other ways to fill in the gap, there were three alternatives for car parking. One is we made it pay. One is the towns took over their own car parks, which we were encouraging people to do. Or third, we could sell the car parks or lease them to somebody else, a third-party supplier like NCP. Well, I think we all realised that if we chose the third version, we would be looking at more than £1 an hour for car parking. We were disappointed that the towns didn't really come forward with a viable option for taking over the car parks, because we think it's really your responsibility, and you would want, we think, to have that influence over something as significant as the car parking within your towns. But we didn't get the response that we needed, so we've had to fall back on the option that we gave, the first one, which is to balance the budget on car parking. So we did try.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Councillor McGowan.
Can I just clarify what we're voting, in what order we're voting, and what the effect of that might be? I think it's best that members be clear.
Please listen carefully.
Or at least I'll try. So I believe, and Bethany, jump in if I get this wrong, that you'll firstly be voting on recommendation 3.1 and 3.4. Yep. And then a separate vote taken on the remainder of the recommendations, so 3.2, 3.3 and 3.5. I am hoping that that will be very clear on the system when you're asked to vote when we get to that stage.
Is that clear, members? Councillor McCall.
It's just that there is a reference in 3.5 to 3.1 to 3.4. That would mean, by extension, that there is a cross-connection. Does it not? Purely using logic, Mr.
It does indeed.
It does indeed, yeah, absolutely, and I'm assuming that the request is to enable Councillor Carter to vote in favour of some elements and possibly against other elements.
So if we're doing this, then it'll be those aspects of 3.1 to 3.4 that are included in the decision regarding 3.2 and 3.3 and 3.4. Is that right? Okay, no, I'm just it's a logical inconsistency, that's all.
So in the event that the Cabinet vote in favour of some and against others, then I will be coming back to you.
Thank you, Chair. The vote for recommendations 3.1 and 3.4 is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Right, we'll now move to the next vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote for recommendations 3.2, 3.3 and 3.5 is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for and 1 against. That's carried.
Thank you. Right. The meeting is now closed.